Question from the audience about whether humanity is playing God by even contemplating these sorts of things. So who wants to tackle that?
Whether we like it or not, we are already intervening in the Earth system at massive scales. We are already emitting sulfur into the lower atmosphere at a level that cools the Earth to an amount that's equivalent to about half of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. And so if we stopped our current sulfur emissions to the atmosphere, the Earth would heat up quite rapidly. And so
is that geoengineering?
Yeah, and so this is inadvertent through sulfur coming out of power plants today. And so we're talking about putting a few percent of that sulfur in the stratosphere instead of the lower atmosphere. And so I think the difference is that the sulfur that we're emitting and the carbon dioxide that we're emitting, we know that we're changing our Earth's climate, but it's a byproduct of other things that we're seeking to do. And what's new about geoengineering is saying we're not just going to change climate inadvertently and knowingly, because we all know that we're changing climate when we drive home tonight and CO2 comes out of our tailpipe. But it's a very different thing if you're driving home with the intent that I'm going to drive, so I'm going to heat up the climate. And so what's new here is the intention to alter climate, but we're all doing things every day that we know affects climate.
Let me emphasize what Ken said there. So he says that right now there's a certain amount of pollution in our cities in China and around the world, and the particulate matter actually has a net cooling effect of about 1 degree centigrade or so, something on that order.
Closer to a degree Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit, okay. And that if we start to improve and clean up our cities, we're going to make the global warming that much worse if we were to do that.
So environmentalism is bad?
No, it's just that it has consequences.
It exacerbates
because
warming.
of the way we evolved. We have the net effect of the pollution has been actually to help have a net cooling effect, and the other carbon buildups has a net heat capture effect. And so in balance you have this equilibrium, and as you start to clean up the air, it's going to put even more pressure on the warming that's due to the carbon. So you're going to have to work even harder to get the carbon out to mitigate this additional effect.
Let me add a couple points on this. I think that question highlights the fact that this ultimately becomes an ethical issue, right? And that I agree. No matter what we do, right, we are already engineering the Earth, right? Yeah. We've intentionally or not. Now, I think the question of intent is critical. Right? I mean, intent. In criminal law, intent is critical to deciding whether or not to be convicted of murder or some lesser offense. Intent is critical here, I think, in figuring out, well, what exactly do we want? Do we want to be living in a more natural world, right? Or do we want to I think this relates to sort of the unintended consequences that can result from the acts that we do. And ultimately, there's an issue here related to hubris. That is, do we have the hubris to do these sorts of things? Now, we can do some research, but ultimately there are always going to be unintended consequences, particularly when the research that we do, we've talked about the difficulty of scaling up the research to actually accurately determine what the effects are going to be.
Before about 5 years ago, our skies were typically blue, and now you see it's covered with lines and haze. We began to eventually test to see if in fact there was credence to what we were seeing. From the first test in precipitation in spring of '06 that tested 7 parts per billion, We've since had tests that have escalated as high as 3,450 parts per billion. That's a 50,000% increase in aluminum.
I sent this water, see it's right there, it says backyard rain gauge. Aluminum, 1,010 micrograms per liter of aluminum. And here's barium, 8 micrograms per liter of barium. And this is from the labs up in Redding, California. This is a certified government report. And here's what normal is. I asked them what would be normal. 0.5 would be normal
for aluminum?
For aluminum. And the maximum allowed in drinking water, they said 50 micrograms per liter, and government action required at 1,000. Well, we're over 1,000.
We're so far off the scales for toxicity in aluminum that it appears to be affecting the flora greatly. Our grass is about a third its height that it was only a few years ago. A 35-year forestry biologist has done 50 pH tests. The rain across the board, every single test was 10 times or more alkaline than it should be.
This is a very delicate moment for the powers that be, because they're taking a covered up operation like the tropospheric aerosol program or chemtrails, Project Icarus, whatever, it's had many names over the years, and they're making it over into a geoengineering scientific shield to deflect sunlight because global warming's out of hand.
I'm a substitute teacher, and so I get to work with a lot of kids. I get to see a lot of kids in this county, and what I noticed in the last 2-3 years I've been working with the kids is that our kids, majority of them have upper respiratory problems. I'd say 2/3 to 3/4 of the kids are hacking and coughing most of the school year. I've spoken with teachers who've told me, I've brought this attention to them, you know, have you seen these skies, you know, all your life? Some of them have lived up here all their lives, and they say that, yeah, their skies look different from when they grew up, because it's a lot of times covered in this white milky haze. But they also have told me that they notice the kids, that the attention deficit, the attention span of the kids, it's their lives as teachers have become so much more difficult.
And again, many times at night as the sun starts to set and there's huge banks of this aircraft disbursement, it literally looks like there's forest fires burning across the mountains because it's a very dirty color. It's not a white cloud or a natural sunset by any means. It looks like there's some sort of massive industrial activity or forest fires burning over there. We see that typically every night.
It was mason jars, and they were brand new, sterilized, and that's what we catch the rain in. And then there was a HEPA filter that we tested the air with.
Okay, so you caught rain and then you basically filtered air. What did you find?
Aluminum and barium.
You may remember the 8,000 dry lightning strikes that occurred in June of 2008. You may remember that. And again, my background, I've done lightning suppression work for Bechtel Power, and I've done worked in some of the first solar plants in the continental U.S. Atmospheric conductivity in the lower 48, I have read a couple articles that's been measured at 4 times its historical conductivity. More atmospheric conductivity would logically mean more lightning. The strikes that we had that day, I spoke to dozens of 30, 40-year veteran firefighters, and they've never seen anything like it. Atmospherically, they've never seen anything like it. Our skies were literally covered with aircraft trails the day that happened. But if you have a more conductive atmosphere, you're going to get more lightning.
Whether people believe in chemtrails or not, the geoengineering should be scary enough. And when people learn about geoengineering, chemtrails will then become apparent because they're the same.
This is from a snow surface at Mount Shasta. 61,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum. This is just ordinary snow water. And people are drinking this stuff when they're hiking on the mountain. And remember, government action is required at 1,000. This is 61 times over the government limit, and our hikers are drinking this poisonous water on Mount Shasta Mountain itself. Strontium, 383. Barium strontium will take away from your bone structure, make for weak bone structure. The aluminum, though, that's scary. You know, what is it? Alzheimer's, autism, gosh knows what that's doing.
A number of other things, neurological.
We speak of these tests that contain massive amounts of heavy metals. Often the first response from people is, well, they're migrating from China. But California Air Quality Resources Board did a study on the aerosols from China, and metals were not amongst those aerosols. Again, the geoengineering patents specifically describe a polymer fiber to keep those metallic particles aloft a little bit longer. So again, if you have one of the most stringent air quality boards on the planet stating that these aerosols are not migrating from there, they weren't there 5 years ago, they're there in lethal quantities now, where are they coming from? Is that where they're coming from? You know, these aircraft you see laying these trails down, again, all I can say for sure is that the metals we're seeing match the patents exactly, and the patents match what we see above us exactly in the scope of creating artificial clouds. So we can only conclude this is the source of these metals.